Hello, and welcome to Our American Government. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson. Last time we were together, we looked at the roots of the American government, particularly at the political theories that form the main ideas behind how we do things here in America. Today, we're going to look at how we move toward creating an American nation based upon the application of those philosophies. Let's see how we do it. First, let's look back to our relationship with Great Britain. It's important to remember that while we had growing frustration with Britain, we did still have this close connection to them. We had derived most of our political traditions from the British, brought them right over on the boat with us. No taxation without representation was a British belief. Today we have adopted it very firmly as an American tradition, but it was a British tradition first. This became a problem in the colonies when in the 1760s, Britain begins imposing taxes within their American colonies. They hadn't had taxation, not direct taxation, in the colonies before the 1760s. So the fact that they didn't have representation in Parliament wasn't a big deal. But now, taxation is coming, but representation did not. Now, the colonists protested this and had several famous events, perhaps the most famous of which being the Boston Tea Party. But the colonial government, led by the British governors, reacted to this by restricting American freedoms, not by granting more. These restrictions of freedoms led the colonies to come together in 1774 for the First Continental Congress. And as a result of this Congress, the colonists demanded better treatment from the British. Now, this treatment was not forthcoming, and pretty soon military conflicts broke out, such as the battles of Lexington and Concord. Following that battle in 1775, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet, a very short book, called Common Sense, and in this he popularized the argument for independence from Great Britain. As the fighting grew worse in Massachusetts, and particularly as the colonists seemed to be doing okay in a lot of these conflicts, such as the Battle of Bunker Hill, seen here, more and more people came to see independence as possible and began to demand it. But Britain, refusing peace, took that decision almost off the table. The American colonies were now going to fight for independence or subjugation. And they formalized this decision at the Second Continental Congress, where Thomas Jefferson was tasked with the assistance of Benjamin Franklin and John Adams, and a couple of others who you don't need to know, with writing the Declaration of Independence. On July 4th, 1776, the Second Continental Congress formally adopted the Declaration of Independence. This created the United States. But, notedly, we did not yet have a strong enough central government to manage this country as a nation. Instead, the signers explicitly stated in this declaration that, quote, these united colonies are of right, ought to be free and independent states, looking at all 13 of them as being these individual entities which were loosely united together. This was the idea that would plague America, but they would also learn from it. You see, the states themselves, those 13 independent units, had functioning governments, and quickly wrote constitutions based upon Montague's separation of power. So they had a governor, they had a legislature, and they had judiciary, all separate. And the Constitution solidified those. So the states right away got practice with this style of government. So while the central United States did not have this type of experience, they were gaining it in the states. And that will later on help them to become a more unified national government. The first attempt to unify was a poor one. It was the Articles of Confederation. This was supposed to guide the nation through issues of national concern. And it created a Confederated Congress to lead the nation through issues of national concern. One initial problem, though, however, was that they had not taken Montesquieu's advice. They had not created an executive or judicial branch. And in fact, they had no executive or judicial powers. They only had their legislature. And additionally, in that legislature, each state had but one single vote on national issues. So you could have small states like Delaware and Rhode Island having equal say with states that had 10, 20 times their population, such as Virginia. This was inherently unequal if you look at it as a single nation. But if you look at it as 13 independent states and a loosely bound alliance system, slightly more equal. But that's not going to work in the long run. Examples of this were shown by the weakness of the Confederated Congress. They did have one successful outcome. While the colonists were united in their defense of each other against the British, the Confederated Congress was able to pull together enough support to assist General George Washington and others in winning the Revolutionary War. The United States did get freedom and independence from Great Britain. But after the war, each state started to focus on their own issues and convincing those states that there were these bigger, broader national issues which needed their attention and their money was a very difficult thing for our National Congress to do. The biggest possible example of this was problems with debt. After the Revolutionary War, the nation was deeply in debt. We had borrowed a lot of money to pay for this, and the states refused to pay that debt. They said this was another state's problem, that Massachusetts should pay this debt because that's where some of the fighting was, or Georgia doesn't want to pay it because Georgia had participated in less fighting. And Congress was not allowed to tax. They couldn't raise money, so they couldn't pay off their national debt. And if you can't pay off your debts, nobody will loan you money. And Congress also couldn't raise new money. This was a very serious problem. And in Massachusetts, this inability to secure foreign loans made an already shaky economy following the war get even worse. And that poor economy led to a rebellion. This rebellion should have been a simple matter, but the Confederated Congress could not manage it. They could not raise money. They could not get other states to help Massachusetts out, with an exception of Delaware. And in Shays Rebellion, it wound up being clear to the nation that each of our states was on their own. We had a failed government. Now, Massachusetts is eventually able to end Shays Rebellion. Daniel Shay right here. Sorry, we lost your rebellion. But the incident really showed Americans that a new government was needed. The Articles of Confederation did not work. Next time, we're going to look at how they create that new government through the Constitutional Convention. States will have to overcome their differences, and we will create what is now recognized as the United States of America. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and farewell.